If you're tuned into the NBA world at all, you probably know about Tyrell Terry and his sudden retirement at the age of 22. Tyrell Terry is a basketball player out of Stanford University. He played one season for Stanford where he earned all Pac-12 honors before moving on to the NBA. He was selected with the 31st pick in the 2020 NBA draft to the Dallas Mavericks. In about 11 games for the Mavericks, Tyrell Terry averaged about 1 point, half a rebound, and half an assist per game. But despite these promising factors, Tyrell has in fact retired at the age of 22 from the NBA. And before we get started, if you're really feeling the holiday cheer this year, please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications in the future. I'm really close to 100 subscribers, and you could very easily be a part of that first 100. As previously mentioned, Tyrell Terry is an NBA basketball player who has retired at the age of 22, citing mental health problems and experiencing, quote, the darkest times of his life. While this is very unfortunate, I think it shines the light on something that a lot of people don't really think about when it comes to professional sports, something I don't think many people who haven't had to dedicate the time and effort into maintaining some level of sport would understand. So before we get really into the nitty-gritty of this and what I would kind of want to touch on, I think it's important to understand who Tyrell Terry is and where he's coming from in his situation. So Tyrell is the son of Carrie Grace and Tyrone Terry. Terry went to De La Salle High School in Minnesota. In his junior season, De La Salle suffered their first state loss after 6 consecutive wins. A few weeks before the Minnesota State basketball playoffs, the Terry family experienced an unfortunate event where recently born Tyshawn Terry passed away at roughly 3 months old from sudden infant death syndrome. Now, as anybody can imagine, this surely weighed on Tyrell, and combine that with the loss at States the following weeks, it's easy to see why this would be a very foundational point in Tyrell Terry's career. Following a buzzer beater loss in the semifinals to Columbia Heights, it is believed that Terry took on the mentality of, I'm not going to let this happen again. And he didn't. He came back and led De La Salle to a state championship his senior year before eventually committing to Stanford University. Despite a sort of natural knack for the game of basketball, Terry wasn't a highly recruited individual before his senior year of high school. Luckily, thanks to a lot of off-season work with then head coach Travis Bledsoe, he was able to put himself on the radar of multiple universities, including Stanford, his eventual commit. It is believed some of the success in this process is owed to Tyrell's dad, Tyrone Terry, who is a former NDSU, North Dakota State University player who still has connections in the scene to this day due to his current career as a basketball trainer. With these ties, word got around, and eventually Tyrell Terry found himself playing for Stanford men's basketball. His first season at Stanford, they started out 11-1 and finished with Stanford's first 21 season since 2014-2015. Following the season, Terry wins Pac-12 all freshman team honors and is projected to be a first-round pick, probably mid to late first round in the NBA draft. With this in mind, Terry sets his sights on the NBA despite being a little undersized, something that a lot of one-year guards find themselves struggling with, but he continues to push on and signs up for the NBA. Despite all the hype around Tyrell, not everybody was as insistent to have him go into the NBA so soon. Terry's father was quoted saying, "When Tyrell showed interest in going to the NBA, the biggest thing was we thought we had an agreement. He wouldn't leave Stanford." And then he goes on to cite that it would be a good education for his son and that there was no financial need for him to enter the NBA so soon. Now, unfortunately, when Tyrell does enter the NBA, despite putting up some of the best basketball IQ scores of all time, apparently, I tried to look and find that test, no idea. And honestly, it'd be one of those things that I could see the real version, and I know so little about the intricacies of the game that probably go over my head, and I'd probably think it's a fake one. Despite on paper looking like a pretty good athlete and a pretty good developmental project, Tyrell unfortunately falls to the 31st pick of the draft, going to the Dallas Mavericks in the first pick of the second round. Now, unfortunately, as many of us know, Tyrell Terry entered the NBA in the COVID year, following the outbreak in late 2019, early 2020. As we know, the NBA, as well as any other sports league, had to undergo very strict and serious maintenance procedures. Things like social distancing, masking, different hygiene and cleaning requirements, many things that directly impact the experience of athletes and individuals within an organization. So I can tell you, as somebody who played 4 years of Division III lacrosse, that it was weird when COVID started. We went from, seeing the boys on the team like every day. I mean, hell, we were used to like freshman year living in the same dorm rooms, like just walking down the hall and seeing each other and just chopping it up whenever we felt like it. Now, for some of us older guys, we were lucky enough to be at a point where we had our own apartments and we could kind of have little soirees and get-togethers that wouldn't necessarily break any COVID guidelines. However, for a lot of our younger guys, it was a much different experience. They were essentially locked down in the dorm rooms for a lot of the time. And anybody who spent an extended period of time in college dorm rooms can tell you it sucks. So an issue that came with this is bonding. The team wasn't able to bond as quickly and as strongly as we had in the past, and I would attribute that almost entirely to this pressure put on us by COVID and the separation that brought with it. Even making the transition to college can be one of the most stressful things somebody can go through. So to turn around and have to go to the NBA within a year sounds completely overwhelming, if I'm going to be honest with you. So to say Terry didn't get a normal introduction into the league is beyond an understatement. In an interview with some Mavericks, some Maverick reporters, he notes that there were times where it was kind of like he wasn't even on the team. They had to stay separate. They couldn't eat together. They couldn't, like I said, hang out to the capacity that players would normally do when, they have rookies and new individuals in the room. And with how much that hurt the freshmen on our team, I can only imagine what it did for individuals like Terry and other rookies who were just coming into the league and, didn't really have an established body of work to go off of. It's not like Terry was coming in with 4 years where he won, the tournament and got, all these honors and da-da-da-da. He was a great player his freshman year for Stanford, but it's, it's 1 year. It's not like as much confidence as you can get from 1 year. When you make that big of a jump, even that confidence you build is probably about worthless. And all this built up to yesterday, December the, I believe, 16th, Tyrell Terry went to Instagram to announce his retirement from the NBA. Now, in the Instagram post, Tyrell Terry talks about sort of the duality of the situation. While at one hand, he was able to achieve a dream of his of making it to the NBA and, in fact, playing in the NBA, whether or not he had a small amount of minutes or not, he did it and he made it. All the stress and the pressure that comes along with that isn't what it's made out to be. So to say he had a rough introduction to the league is an understatement. And it's one of those things that I feel like probably compounded on that sentiment in what his father said about staying at Stanford and getting an education. Because if you go to the league so quickly and, you're trying to forego, you're leaving behind the year of experience you have with your brothers in college, you're leaving behind, the amount of whatever education you had up to that point, you're leaving behind a lot in a sort of idealistic venture that may not work out. And as we can see, it didn't work out in this situation. In the post, he talks about, despite this game being the one he loves and has dedicated his life to, it has brought him to some of the darkest points in his life. He talks about severe anxiety problems, issues sleeping, having a hard time breathing due to anxiety and feeling like there's a weight on his chest. He talks about a lot of things that I think many of us who have suffered with severe anxiety can relate to. As I mentioned, and while I'm not Stanford D1 or anything like that, while I was a lacrosse player in college at Chatham University, I developed super bad anxiety towards my sport, lacrosse, that I loved and held, and still to this day hold very dearly to my heart. My coach for my first 3 years, he was a bit of an asshole. That's like the nicest way I could possibly say it. But because he was freaking wishy-washy on stuff and wouldn't, give straight answers and, be honest with his players, and just kind of had you on edge. And it got to the point where I was pretty much losing all my playing time and being given, like, the most inconcise answers as to why that might be. And because of that, I just got super, super bad anxiety towards anything lacrosse related. I mean, I can tell you, we would have film pretty much every day for an hour before practice, and sitting in film, literally I wouldn't have questions directed at me or nothing. Just sitting in film was hell. I would be so beside myself with anxiety, just an absolute nervous wreck, that by the time we were done, oh my gosh, I just wanted to jump out of my chair and sprint outside and just be done with it. Like, it was so encapsulating that it seriously does become a feeling of just an overwhelming feeling of the stress and this inability to really escape from it, because this thing that you hold so dearly and this thing that you love so much, your sport, becomes the thing that's destroying you. And when that's the case, you come to the point where Tyrell came to, and he unfortunately was forced to make the decision to give up the thing he loved to protect himself. This is one of those situations where you can't really look at it and truthfully declare a winner. You know, it's a situation where everybody loses. Not only does Tyrell lose his, kind of losing out on a dream of his, but the rest of us don't get to enjoy that dream with him. I'm not going to act like before this event I was some huge Tyrell fan. I wasn't rocking with him back at Stanford or anything, but reading his Instagram post and doing the research for this video really made me relate to, his situation, to what I went through with lacrosse, and just the pain it caused to have something I love so much affect me so negatively. And I was lucky enough that my senior year, we got a brand new head coach, and he was much cooler and much more straight up with me. And despite the fact that my skills had declined to the point where I rode the bench mostly, I was still able to make the most out of my senior year and have a pretty enjoyable season with my brothers, because I accepted my role and I just bought into it with everything I had. Unfortunately, you can't exactly just ride the bench in the NBA. Of course, numerous guys do, but it's something that when you're as intelligent as an individual as Tyrell seems to be, you don't want to ride the bench. You sitting on the bench is worse than not sitting in the arena, because it's proof of what you're capable of, and at the same time proof of what you are not achieving, if that makes any sense. So the last thing I want to read to you here is from the Instagram post. Attached along with a few other photos is what looks to be a text message, and I'm going to read you the content right here. No one knows what is going on. We're on a rock spinning in nothingness. Time and space flip rolls in a black hole. We're just existing, trying to make sense of it, which to me is liberating. Nothing is that serious. All you can do is exist and enjoy the mystery of it all. And on that note, my name is Zachary Taylor. Thank you for your time today.